In this lesson, we are going to learn exactly how the CPU processes the program that's been downloaded to it. Basically, when the CPU processes our program, we can think of its operation as three main steps. So let's go through the details of each step to see what happens. Okay, in the first step, the CPU reads the status of each input from the input module and then saves these values to the PII, or process image input. For instance, it checks to see whether the first input is true or false. Then it goes on to check the second input, then the third input, and it continues this process for all the inputs. Finally, as we said earlier, it saves all these values to the PII so that it can use them in the next step. In the second step, the CPU processes the program that we wrote in the OB1 and starts processing or solving the logic from the first network. As part of this process, when it sees an input address, it checks the status of the address in the PII and solves the logic based on that value. When it sees an output address, it saves the status to the PIQ. For example, in this program, it first checks the status of this drill start in the PII. If the status is true, it energizes the drill output and saves the output status of true to the PIQ. Now, in the third step, it's time to write the outputs. The CPU sends the values that have been saved to the PIQ to the output module. Now, what happens next? The CPU returns to the first step and repeats the process of reading inputs, processing the program, and writing outputs, and so on. So how long does it continue repeating this cycle? Well, it continues permanently while the CPU is in run mode and stops when we put it into stop mode.